Welcome to the First Responders Wealth Network. Our mission is to help all first responders change their mindset towards money and educate how to build long-term wealth through real estate investing. Are you ready?
All right, guys, welcome back to another podcast. I got my man Nick here, and we're just chatting off air here and learning more and more about you. So I'm excited to kind of dive in and ask you some more specific questions. I know you've had a cool transition, Canadian, now kind of pivoting into a lot of doing some bigger stuff down in the US. So we can talk about that. But before we get rolling, why don't you just introduce yourself and we'll go from there.
Sure. Well, thanks for having me. My name's Nick VanDyk, formerly employed with the government, working for a municipality, doing civil engineering projects and stuff like that. When I was working, I hated the politics and, laziness of how some government institutions work, I guess. But so when I was working, we started buying some real estate, just kind of one thing led to another. And, I got that real estate bug and started buying property after property after property, and then did some flips, some assignments, and then we did a bunch of duplex conversions, and then we got into some larger multifamily properties. Then we ended up buying a property out in Edmonton, 13-unit building there, and just recently we bought some properties down in Florida for short-term rentals, and then now we're developing a 100,000 square foot self-storage facility in Houston, Texas now. So that's the next big thing, I guess.
Yeah, that is a big thing. That seems like quite the project there. So obviously city worker, the old golden handcuffs or whatnot, but let's just start there. Because a lot of people obviously in my community can relate to that. So at what stage before exiting, your employer, but how did you get your first property? Like what type of mindset were you in? What kind of education did you have, or was it just something you fell into accidentally?
No, so the short of it, one night after playing old timers hockey with my dad, he gave me a book. He's like, "Here, you should read this book." And Rich Dad Poor Dad, ironically. And that night I read the first chapter, and it just started changing the way I thought. And then one thing led to another, and we started doing some more research and investing in real estate and how all that works, and just different ways to generate income and whatnot. And then I think I was like, I don't know, 17 or something at that time.
Oh, so you're younger at that time.
Yeah, I was young, at that time, like when I first started just getting the idea rolling. Like I've always been, probably more my parents too, like they've always been entrepreneurial growing up. Like my parents have had businesses and restaurants and stuff like that. So, but yeah, anyways, after the book, I read that, just got me thinking differently. Years went by, I kept on, wanting to buy a rental property. Then my girlfriend, now wife, she wasn't so keen on the idea because, it's risky. Real estate's risky. Shouldn't do that. I just kept persuading, and, one thing led to another. And we bought our first property, I'm going to say 2013, or I think it was. And then, it started cash flowing some money, and it was like, okay, let's do this again. And we just kept on repeating. How I bought that first property was, so if you're probably aware of the rules in Ontario, you got to do investment properties, got to be 20% down, young and poor, and I didn't have any money. So I was like, okay, well, how do I buy my first property with less amount? So at the time you could do 5% down for owner occupied properties if it's, more than 50% occupied. So I said my in-laws and whatnot were moving into it, and we bought our first property for ourselves, and then like our second, which was our investment property, we did it with 5% down. And then after that, it was like 20%, 25%, and just kept refinancing, borrowing, and saving, and and then we hit a wall eventually where it's like, okay, you run out of money or you run out of stuff. So then we started getting investors and JVs and stuff like that to keep growing.
Cool, man. I love that your dad gave you the book.
Yeah.
I find every family's different, clearly, but my dad, my parents had a bunch of restaurant franchises too, in the pizza business actually, and they're very entrepreneur, but not really anything like that. So it wasn't until maybe, I don't know, maybe 3 or 4 years ago where I introduced them to Rich Dad Poor Dad, and it was kind of like upside down. But and I remember they were driving with my uncle, actually, that they're listening to the audio, and my other uncle, who's very successful, he like couldn't handle it. He thought it was just out in left field. So it's funny how some people can really gravitate towards that and kind of change their perspective, and some kind of think, kind of roll their eyes at it a little bit. But it's definitely been a book that's changed a lot of real estate investors for sure.
Yeah, honestly, like, and it's not really just per se about like real estate, like obviously it is, but it just changed. Like for me, the way I took it was it just kind of made you think differently. Like,
Yeah, assets versus liabilities. It's a broad term, but you're absolutely right.
I use it today. Like, if I want to buy something, whether it's a boat or toy or whatever, I'll make sure that I use my asset to pay for the liability. Like it's pretty simple. Yeah, no, a lot of people lose that train of thought, I guess. So
no, for sure. And I mean, with what's his name? I mean, he does push the boundaries a little bit and push some buttons, but that's why he's so good, Robert Kiyosaki. Cool, man. So you started rolling, you started getting some multiple properties, and then at what point were you like, okay, I can leave my job and like maybe replace my income, or was it just like, okay, I'm gonna go all in, let's see if we can make this work?
honestly, like I'm pretty simple the way I think. I tried to be, at least. And I think our very first property was like, okay, we're making $500 a month, and I'm like, you know what? If I buy, I don't know, a bunch of these, I don't need a job, and
Right.
I'm going to spend my time doing what I want to do, right? So that's literally all I thought about at that time. And then we got more properties and kept rolling. And one thing I did was we never took a penny from our properties to put in our own pocket. We would always either reinvest it, put it into another property, or just basically build an account. Until the point where I was like, okay, well, I was generating, more income than what I was getting paid at my job. I've maxed out what I could qualify for mortgages, and literally the only thing that my job was providing was benefits, pension, and basically eating into my time. So it was like, okay, well, okay, pension, that's nice, but I have a bunch of houses now, and benefits didn't really care to be
Right.
done.
Yeah. We're
Private.
still young and we're not really
Yeah,
itching at that kind of stuff.
yeah, my kids don't need braces yet, so it should be okay. So yeah, so basically, and I was like, okay, well then if I could free up that time, what then can I achieve? And then, the next goal was, okay, then my wife wants to leave her job, and then we're just gonna basically grow our income, grow our wealth, and live, really.
So did your wife quit her job too? Now you guys both work in the business, or how's that look?
Yeah, she's done working now. She didn't quit for actually she just quit. Well, she went part-time. She was working full-time, then she went part-time. She's completely done. She doesn't have a job no more, so no 9 to 5. And it's basically just full-time real estate and
Amazing. Love
doing
it.
our thing.
And then you have how many kids?
2.
Your hands are still full either way.
Oh yeah. They're 2 boys, they're 6 and 4. So they're
oh yeah. I got
yeah,
a buddy who's in that age. I know exactly what you're going through.
sorry, what was that? You have kids?
No. I have a buddy who's got the same ages, and I know exactly what you're going through.
Yeah. My kids are animals some days. So
yeah. So boys will be boys. Cool. So kind of that transition, you guys obviously are on the same page, you're kind of the same goals, and you're working, you're growing, and you're kind of transitioning. I know you kind of said at the beginning you started a single family and then you got into the 13 unit. Now you're doing storage stuff. So rather than like talking about each stage, let's just go to where you are now. So why self-storage? Why the US? Give me the whole pitch there.
So we went to Florida. You heard the story. We planned a 3-week trip, stayed for 3 months. It was during COVID when you weren't allowed to live in Canada, and you could be, you were allowed to do what you want to do in Florida. So we were enjoying our time there, stayed longer, went to a couple of real estate events, met some other people, in different industries and stuff. You got multifamily, Airbnbs, flips, storage, whatever. So I met a guy in Florida who was doing self-storage, and prior to that, he was doing probably about 100 flips a year. So, and at that time, I was obviously doing real estate investing and stuff, but more residential. And as you're probably aware, like prices just went skyrocketed. The deals that used to be a deal weren't really deals. Things were saturated. It was just hard to kind of keep scaling and keep growing. So I was looking for like something different, something obviously still related to real estate and assets and cash flow and whatnot, but just something that I can grow faster and larger. So he did his spiel on self-storage, and I'm like, and I was more or less relating it to exactly what I was already doing, buying a property, adding value, and either selling it, refinancing it, and on to the next. So that's essentially what self-storage was. It's just when you start looking into it and like really seeing the value behind it, well, pretty much the main thing is like, obviously there's the same thing as whether you're doing a duplex conversion, but just way more zeros, like
right, bigger
a
scale,
lot more profit. Instead of doing a $500,000 or $800,000 property, you're developing something that's going to be worth $22-25 million. So
right,
completely different ball game, but in a way kind of simpler, because you don't have kitchens, baths, paint, floors, toilets like galore. Like, it's concrete, asphalt, steel. It's just a big garage with a bunch of doors. Like, there's not a whole lot to it. So
right.
but yeah, so we started diving into that, and that's, right now we have a site that we closed on a couple months ago in Houston, Texas. It's, again, we can talk about that if you want to use that as an example. But so yeah, that site, it's 7.5 acres in Houston, Texas, and we're developing a 105,000 square feet self-storage facility, Class A. It's all one level. Basically, the short of it, it's the cost for that site with the land, the build, everything, construction all in, is roughly about 13.2 million. And then 24 to 36 months later, once it's developed, stabilized, it at a 5.5 cap, it'll be worth around $22 million.
Wow.
So yeah, so like, when you kind of dumb it down and simplify it a little bit, it was like, okay, $9 million in 24 to 36 months.
That was my next question. How long to build something like that?
Yeah, so basically we're anticipating, like, by the time you close, go through all the permits, drawings, everything, it's about 24 months, probably quicker, but we're anticipating about 24 months to get it built.
That's
Like,
not
ready
bad.
to be open. No,
That's not bad at all.
no. That's
Cool.
where I was comparing that to like an apartment building, where it's like, okay, especially in Ontario with the rules, you
Right.
buy a building, you're anticipating 3, 5, maybe even longer by the time you turn over all of units. And
Yeah, especially when you're doing like a value add play, for
yeah,
sure. Yeah. Sorry, how many square feet did you say that was?
it's 105,000 like total. I
Wow.
think I think like that's with an office, bathroom, all that other stuff.
Yeah.
Like total net rentable, I think we're at about 98,000 right now. It was 95, but we rejigged a few things in the drawing, so we're able to squeeze out a little bit more.
Nice. So then in a facility like that, you got X amount of full-time employees. Like, what does it take to run something like that?
So again, that's kind of where I was going with trying to keep things simple, but at the same time scale and do things bigger. So kind of like a property, like a apartment building, you can either self-manage it or you can hire a management company. So there's two things why we do it. It's like so large, like 100,000 square feet or bigger, right? Is one, when we go to decide to sell it, is for our exit strategy. So large REITs or investment companies want to buy it. But also for management, we'll hire someone like CubeSmart, Extra Space. They're basically a large management company in the United States that only want to manage large facilities. So
like that,
they manage it. Like, we build it, develop it, own it, hire a management company who specialize in managing, and they stabilize it and get it rented. And
so is your exit strategy to sell, or the possibility to burn it and hold on to it or refi?
Yeah, like worst case scenario, we're going to burn it. Like, we'll get it completed, we'll get it stabilized, we'll refinance, pull out all our money, and distribute refi proceeds, all that stuff, collect cash flow, and be on to the next. Option two is we can either sell it once it's stabilized, because that's probably the highest value at that point because it's generating income, or we'll sell it straight at CO. So basically, once it's built but it's vacant, if someone's willing to pay a pretty penny for it, then
you like it that way.
If I can get a good return and offer good returns to our investors, then hey, we'll sell it and be on to the next, right?
And I was going to say, and do it again. Right on.
Yeah.
Is this like a large group or large like a lot of partners that are in on this with you, or how does that look? Like the syndication, obviously,
So
right? Like, is there a lot of GPs involved,
yeah,
or
so basically it's a LP structure. You got GP, LP side. Basically a syndication. Not really necessarily do that in Canada, but in the US it's a bit bigger. So we're raising money on the investment side. So for example, on this one, we're raising, I think it's around 3.1 million US to basically buy the land, close, get things done, and get things rolling. And then
yeah,
we'll get construction financing for the remainder. So basically, there's LP investors, and then the GP side, which is like your active partner, and that's basically us. We're bringing on my coach that I hired last year, who also he's in the self storage game, so he's got 9 or 10 sites on the go right now. So basically, I'm partnering with him to leverage his contacts and
amazing,
his
yeah,
resources. And then we're also offering out equity to certain KPs for someone who's going to sign on a construction loan or something like that. Because when you get a $10 million construction loan in the United States, when you're Canadian, you got
it's
to jump through a
recourse.
few more hoops. Yeah.
Yeah. Cool. Well, that's not bad, man. Like, I mean, if you're able to get in there for 3.1 and then get the construction loan, obviously having that assistance and those
Yep.
people around you, have your team around you, that's not too bad to get a raise for something like that. That's
Yeah. Like
very, very,
that's
very
where, like,
enticing. Obviously,
yeah.
there's a lot to it. It's not as easy as
Oh,
just
yeah.
raising
Yeah.
capital, but it's good.
Yeah. Like,
Lots of
I,
potential.
I look at it as like a large piece of pie. Like, there's all this equity or all this value that you can produce, and sure everybody wants to take the whole piece of pie, but it's easier doing, you can bring in all these resources and partner with people and get help, and you help other people, they help you, and like I've always said, like whether you're doing a duplex or apartment building, self-storage, whatever, the big thing is everybody's got to make money, everyone's got to bring value and add value and stuff, but if everybody's making money, that's kind of what makes the world go around. So with so much profit in one deal, you can say, okay, investors get this much, GP people get this much, KP gets this much, and like you can divvy up where everyone's doing stuff and making money. It's like that's kind of
Yeah.
the main goal.
Amazing. It's kind of like we were talking off air. It's kind of the road I'm very interested in learning a little bit more about,
Yeah,
is just teaming up with people doing larger deals. I think
absolutely.
the returns are great too. So
Yeah.
speaking of returns, what kind of returns are, I mean, I know you can't promise anything, so you can
Yeah.
use your words carefully, but at the end of the day, what kind of goals or setting of returns are you guys looking at?
Yeah, so like on each deal we do, like our targeted returns are anywhere like for our investors and stuff are basically 15 to 25% is our target returns. And like so for example, if someone invests in one of our deal and they buy a share of our development, we pay a 10% preferred return right off the hop. So every investor that we've had, they basically, everyone wants to make money like day one. So
Mhm.
we're offering a 10% preferred return right off the hop, and then they get equity in the deal as time goes on. You keep the site. If we keep it, we refi and pay everyone back, then we're keeping all of our investors on until we decide to, sell the
Exit.
property down the road or whatever. Like some syndications, obviously, like, okay, you invest your 100 grand or 200 grand or whatever. And then once they're done, it's like, okay, here's your money back. Here's some profit. See you later.
Yeah.
So we're treating it just like a smaller property, and we're keeping our investors on, and they essentially get paid for the life of owning the property. So, but yeah, like on this deal, like I was saying before, the total cost to build it is about 13.2, and the
Mhm.
stabilized value is going to be in around 22 million. At a
Uh,
65% loan to value, we're going to pull out at like 65% loan to value, 5.5 cap. We're going to pull out about a little over 14.2 million. So we're basically get to pay off our entire construction loan, pay off like 100% of the cost, pay back everyone's investment, and have $1 million of tax-free money, which then gets distributed between all your GP and LP owners.
Amazing.
So, and
That's
then
solid.
the icing on the cake is this property will generate roughly around $280,000 US on an annual basis for cash flow, which obviously if someone owns 2 or 5 shares or whatever, they get
Yeah.
their distribution of cash flow on an annual basis. So
Man, 10% preferred. That's pretty darn good.
yeah,
You
well,
know,
heck, rates these days, I think you almost have to.
well, that's true too. But nonetheless, I mean, you can only you can only push returns so high. I mean,
That's where
interest
like
rates.
there's so much meat on the bone where it's like, hey, if you can offer it,
Yeah. And not only that, you have the ability to wait. You have patient investors who are willing to wait. But I mean, with a 10% return, you're still doing really well. Even if you're
yeah, that's
borrowing
what
at 6%, I mean, you're still making 4% while you wait, right?
exactly.
So
Yeah, so you're still making money right off the hop, and then
yeah,
once the property's sold or refinanced, then you get your big check at the end.
cool. What do you find is kind of the biggest hurdle with Canadian investors investing in the US with your investments? Or certain things that they might need to know or
Yeah, like the right now, I guess, like, well, the way we structure it is, so we have two subscription documents. So like our Canadian investors will invest into our Canadian LP, and then
okay.
US investors will invest into our US LP. And then those LPs are the limited partners of our US LP that owns the property. So like when you're looking at our legal structure for like our entities and everything,
Yeah.
it's like I don't know, there's all these triangles and squares and
Yeah.
arrows and a border in the middle. Like it's pretty complicated. But so like explaining that to investors sometimes is like, not that they need to know everything, but that's the whole point of investing in deals like this, right? It's just passive. But explaining like how everything works is sometimes a little bit of a hurdle. But at the same time, people like, for Canadian investors investing in the United States, now you have the currency and exchange and whatnot. So that's a little bit of a, you don't really know where the dollar is going right now. It's not very good. But at the same time, like, someone invests in US, like, this is how we do it. If someone invests in US currency, we pay that 10% in US
US
currency.
currency.
Everything's all US. And then, when each investor, they want to transfer money into their Canadian account or whatever, then they can just kind of watch the dollar. And
Yeah. And now, like you said, in the back end, this is what I always like is, it's like putting a down payment on a house. And I get the same rebuttal too. It's like, well, I don't want to pay when it's like 35, 40% or whatever it is right now for exchange rate. But that's
yeah,
really only your down payment, and then you're getting all your loans and your construction loan and in your back end returns all in American dollars. So really it's only a small piece of what you're putting down in the whole scheme of things if you look at it that way.
like a lot of people that we talk to, like when they're like, oh, I want to invest in real estate, but interest rates are so high. I'm like, sure, they're high,
Yeah.
but if
What
you're
are you gonna
making
do?
if you're going to make more money, who really cares? You're just leveraging the bank, right? Like, you're just leveraging money to invest. So
Especially the kicker is if you're able to burr out of that project and you get all your capital back, plus you're going to get cash flow and equity piece. At what
lots of
point?
pros.
Yeah, at what point are you going to start being like, okay, where are you going to get anything better? You're gonna, you're
That's,
getting all your capital back,
yeah,
so
like
and
in
you're going to
like
continue to grow and produce.
when I was doing like a duplex conversion or multifamily property, whatever, the whole goal was like, okay, I'm going to buy this property, I'm going to add value through renovations, whatever, add some units, refinance it. If I can pull some money out or a bunch of money, and still has some good cash flow, then good, that's a win,
Yeah.
right? Here we're pulling out all of the money and another $1,000,000, and it's
Mhm.
still cash flows. So it's like, I don't know. To me, I'm like, my light bulbs are going off in my head, and I'm like, yep, sign me up. We're gonna do more of these.
That's awesome. Right on. Well, I think this is kind of unique in self-storage and which is kind of different than maybe what we always talk about residential
Yeah.
stuff, especially when you're like a newbie investor, might be a kind of a higher level discussion here. But at the end of the day, the one thing I do like about it, and I've heard you talk about it on your stories and stuff, and I've been following you, is the ability to hedge the inflation and ability to hedge recession in the past. So there's a lot of data behind obviously where you're developing is a key factor of that, but there's high demand in
Well,
the self storage.
when you look at self storage as just like an industry, it's just been a constant increase in the last 40 years. Like, through good times, everyone's interest rates are low, everyone's making money, everyone's spending money, a good economy. They're buying stuff, whether it's, more toys or stuff for their family, or businesses are, growing and stuff. You got to still put that stuff somewhere. So like, the more people spend money, the more stuff there is, the more stuff ends up in storage. And then the reverse of it is like, okay, during a recession or a downturn, you have people downsizing or going from their big house to their little house, or businesses closing and they need to store their stuff for the time being. and they still store their stuff. Like it's
Yeah.
needed in both economies, right? So it almost like it thrives in good and bad times, like which is nice when you're, especially when you're parking some money somewhere. But yeah, even like I could talk for hours literally on self-storage, so like cut me off, I'm blabbing, but
No, you're good. You're good.
It's very lucrative to say the least.
Yeah, and stable. Obviously, that's why you made the decision to dive into it.
Yeah.
So cool, man. Well, I appreciate your time and kind of going all over that. It was a bit of a learning curve for me too. A little bit familiar with it, but to kind of get an inside look at what you're doing, I think is pretty cool. So if anyone wants to reach out to you, how can they do that?
Yeah, so the easiest way to reach out is probably through Instagram, NVD Properties. Feel free to reach out if anybody's got questions, whatever. We're here to help.
Love it. Love it. All right, man. Thanks again. And I'll let you know when this comes out.
Awesome. Thanks for having me. Take care.
Thanks for listening. Don't forget to rate and review on iTunes. Also, check out our website at 911wealthnetwork.com or contact Dave directly at 911wealthnetwork.com. Stay safe out there.